The marketplace, or markt, of the town of 's-Hertogenbosch is very old. The drapers who once sold their cloth and silks there, as shown in this painting from 1526, still have their stalls in the same spot today. On a pedestal in a discreet corner of this square stands the statue of the farmer Knillis. It will be unveiled on the first day of Carnival. Though many things have changed since the Middle Ages, one thing that has survived here is the continued carnival spirit known to Hieronymus Bosch, this town's most eminent painter. In a famous panel by Bosch, a poor man, the wayfarer, is travelling on foot through a landscape. He glances back, seemingly intrigued, towards a dilapidated building, half inn, half brothel. Bosch seems to have captured the moment of temptation, the choice between the sin of lust and the path of virtue, between the prospect of hell or the promise of paradise. The painter's entire work resounds like a warning, illustrating the struggle of the will torn between these two forces. This theme is also to be found in his large triptychs, for example, the Garden of Earthly Delights. Naked women, the very essence of temptation, are presented in association with fruit and its fleeting taste. Bosch's Hell, and Bosch is the painter of hell, shows in excruciating detail the punishments meted out to those who do not deserve their place in heaven. And according to the medieval texts, there is no vice that will not receive its proper retribution. Proud and lecherous women are condemned to endure the attentions of toads and lizards, and their image is reflected in the polished bottom of an animal tree. Alcoholics who have spent their lives in taverns drinking and gambling are cut into pieces or pierced by knives. Musicians guilty of having charmed the senses, lust is the music of the flesh, say the scriptures, are tortured by their instruments, which have taken on monstrous proportions. Unexpectedly, the image of the kingdom of hell is to be found in Iceland. The hard starkness of its volcanic fields, their mineral aspect, devoid of all forms of life, brings to mind the outer panels of the Garden of Delights. A 14th century Icelandic saga written well before Bosch was born gives a dramatic description of the torments of hell. The angel and the monk saw a man seated on a blazing chair. There before them stood beautiful women inserting lighted candles into his mouth, down into his stomach and out through his penis. The angel explained that this man was the enemy of his own soul. He ate and drank without moderation. He led a debauched life, and because he loved women beyond all divine law, they now tortured him by keeping his malevolent soul a prisoner of their bodies, burning his mouth, his belly, and his penis. Jeroen van Aken, who signed under the name of Bosch, was born around 1450. A time when the first stirrings of a great upheaval were being felt in Europe, with major new discoveries and a spiritual crisis. When Bosch died in 1516, the doctrine of Martin Luther had already been conceived. 1 year later, the nailing of his 95 theses to the door of a Wittenberg church marked the beginnings of the rift in Christianity.
Il y a un tableau au Louvre du maître de la vie de Sainte Gudule qui est l'instruction pastorale. Et c'est un tableau extraordinaire parce qu'on voit donc un prélat qui est en train, comme le titre du tableau l'indique, de faire en quelque sorte le catéchisme aux adultes. Eh bien, qu'est-ce qu'on voit dans l'assistance? Des gens qui, pour beaucoup d'entre eux, n'écoutent pas. Pourquoi est-ce qu'ils n'écoutent pas? Parce qu'il y a des courtiers qui leur tirent la manche et leur tendent un billet. On peut imaginer que ces gens, ce sont des banquiers, des grands marchands, qui pensent à leur comptabilité en partie double au lieu d'écouter ce que leur raconte le prélat, qui ont leurs soucis d'hommes d'affaires, etc. Finalement, cette crise spirituelle, c'est le refus d'une certaine forme de culpabilisation médiévale qui n'est plus possible, qui n'est plus tenable psychologiquement pour des gens qui, encore une fois, vont être pris, envahis par des préoccupations d'ordre matériel et commercial.
Venice, the museum of the Doge's Palace. The 4 Paradise and Hell panels are being taken down to be prepared for travel. In a few days' time, a major Bosch retrospective will be opened in the Boijmans Museum of Rotterdam in Holland. Gloria Tranquilli, the Italian restorer, keeps a watchful eye on the operation.
Lorsque Peter Bruegel a fait le voyage en Italie, il n'a pas tout de suite peint les tableaux italiens, des tableaux à l'italienne, il n'a pas tout de suite représenté ce qu'il avait marqué dans son voyage, mais qu'une fois rentré chez lui, aux anciens Pays-Bas, il a comme vomi tout ce qu'il avait assimilé pendant son voyage, après une sorte de digestion. C'est la même chose au plan de la civilisation. Bosch, finalement, il fait génialement, au sens artistique, une espèce de vomissement de toutes les inquiétudes du monde médiéval.
Before the paintings are carefully placed in handmade flight containers, a condition report must be carried out. Alterations, cracks, missing paint and possible scratches are meticulously noted on photocopies.
I do not think that Bosch ever visited Italy, and consequently the paintings in the Palazzo Ducale, one of the great treasures of Bosch paintings in the world, as we all know. I believe these paintings were done by Bosch in the Netherlands. According to my theory, the paintings now in the Palazzo Ducale were bought by an intermediary, a middleman, after the death of the artist from his estate, and then brought to the great Cardinal Domenico Grimani, one of the great collectors, great early collectors of the Renaissance, who collected both classical antiquity and Flemish painting. They were typically the sort of paintings that appealed to him because they had lots of monsters and they had lots of spectacular, dramatic fires. And that's what they loved in Italy.
The first stage of this journey will be by boat. It's rare to see such priceless paintings transported like this, but in Venice there's no alternative. The 4 panels by Bosch, wedged into their air-conditioned flight cases to ensure constant temperature and humidity, return temporarily to the north. Today they're travelling in the opposite direction, because it is probably from Bosch's native city that they left for Venice 5 centuries ago.
Bosch is net als Kafka een van de weinigen die het tot op bijvoeglijk naamwoord gebracht heeft. Ik bedoel, je kunt zeggen dat een situatie Kafkaiaans is. Zo kun je in beschrijvingen van horrorfilms tegenkomen dat een bloederige, gruwelijke scène Bossiaans is. Dat mag geheel en al ten onrechte zijn, maar het is toch wel het beeld wat de meeste mensen bij Jeroen Bosch hebben. Inderdaad, de schilder van monsters en duivels.
In its permanent collection, the Boijmans van Beuningen Museum in Rotterdam has a small number of paintings by or after Hieronymus Bosch. The current director, Chris Durkin, wanted to organise a major retrospective devoted to the painter, featuring the artist's original panels, copies and contemporary works of art.
When we started to investigate if we could at all do this exhibition in terms of, for instance, transportation and safety of the paintings, in the beginning there was still this hesitation of you don't transport panels. But in the course of, you saw the changes already in the sense that, you know, new techniques are being developed, crates are getting better, things are more secure. This exhibition is not only education for the public, it's also, I think, a laboratory for the scholars. And that's one of the reasons also why lenders, at least some lenders, and I think very important lenders, were quite eager to work with. Because these things are coming together, and these things, you know, get to be shown and can be studied together. And you can jump from one to the next, as it were, which you will never could do with reproductions. I mean, this physical presence is actually so important.
Hieronymus van Aken was probably born in 's-Hertogenbosch, which lies about 80 kilometers from Rotterdam, into a family of painters of German origin. At that time, some 40 or so churches, chapels and monasteries flourished in his native city. The family home and the workshop, the Sint-Teunishuis, was bought by his father in 1462. It clearly figures on this painting the Schirmer's Revolt, painted at the beginning of the 17th century. Today it's a souvenir shop, De Kleine Winst, the small profit. On the northern side of the marketplace stands the house in Den Salvator, where from 1481 onwards Bosch lived with his wife Aleet. Today the ground floor has become a shoe shop.
Dat mysterie van Bosch is natuurlijk heel interessant, want ja, het maakt het mogelijk om een mythe rond de man te creëren. Maar als je werkelijk afgaat op de archiefgegevens die over hem bewaard zijn gebleven, dat zijn er enkele tientallen, dan constateer je eigenlijk dat het een hele brave burger was van 's-Hertogenbosch. Dat hij geen extreme dingen deed, dat hij een heel oppassende man was, die heel zorgvuldig met zijn vermogen en dat van zijn vrouw omging. Dus ik denk dat de waarheid wel eens wat minder extreem zou kunnen zijn dan de schilderijen van de man doen vermoeden.
In the basement of the city archives of 's-Hertogenbosch is a section entitled the Bosch Protocol. Conserved here are many of the notarial records concerning the painter's life, which appear under the name of Van Aken or his first name, Jeroen. But what do these carefully preserved documents actually tell us?
Eigenlijk niet meer dan dat hij getuige is geweest bij verkopingen van panden die in het bezit waren van de familie Bosch. Dat hij dus ook lid was van die familie, hoe de familie enigszins in elkaar zat. Daar wordt ook in verteld dat hij overleden is, althans zeker in het archief van de Illustratieve Vrouwenbroederschap. En dat is eigenlijk zo'n beetje alles. Meer kun je er niet uithalen, hooguit wanneer je wat gaat verbinden met elkaar en daar conclusies uit kunt trekken.
On June the 13th in the year 1463, the city of 's-Hertogenbosch burns. The fire is due to the negligence of a dyer in the house called the Cauldron, in Dyers Street. It quickly spreads to the neighbouring wooden houses and the town hall, whose library and archives are destroyed. Almost 4,000 houses are reduced to ashes. Personal effects, livestock and many people also perish in the flames. If the young Van Aken witnessed this spectacle, it could not have left him indifferent. Iceland, land of ice and fire. For the Christian world, with its heaven on high and hell down below, volcanoes were the tangible proof of the existence of a subterranean hell, peopled with monsters of all sorts. On ancient maps, Hekla, the largest and most dangerous volcano on the island, figures as the gate of hell, and the way to the crater is appropriately called the Trail of the Damned.
Il y a des écrits dès le XIIe siècle qui parlent de ce volcan, qui relate probablement cette éruption monstrueuse de 1104 en expliquant que c'est vraiment l'effroi total et les cendres du volcan vont se répandre partout, en Europe, en Asie et partout sur la planète, et on s'en méfie beaucoup. Oui, il y a quelque chose de Boschien en Islande, toutes ces croyances populaires, tous ces monstres, toutes ces différentes créatures. Il n'y en a pas seulement dans l'air, il y en a dans l'eau, il y en a qui ont le pouvoir de se transformer, il y a des métamorphoses, etc., etc. Et il y a des rayonnages entiers de bibliothèques qui parlent de ça, et on est bercé dès le plus jeune âge ici par ces légendes, ces croyances et toute cette superstition.
The triptych of the Temptation of St. Anthony is based on the life of the saint as related in the Golden Legend by Jacques de Voragine. On the left-hand wing, Anthony, tormented by demons, is rescued and borne up by his fellow hermits. Tossed high into the air, he's again besieged by the forces of evil. On the right-hand panel, Satan tempts the saint by taking on the most appealing of forms. Anthony remains impassive. He's invited to a diabolical banquet at which one of the human pillars of the table has caught his foot in a jug, an allusion to the sexual act. On the central panel, devils of all kinds converge upon a circular edifice before which Anthony is kneeling, his right hand raised in blessing. The village ablaze in the distance is perhaps an allusion to St. Anthony's fire or ergotism, a terrible disease caused by ergot of rye. The monks of the Order of St. Anthony specialized in the treatment and care of the victims. They suffered from burning sensations and hallucinations of being attacked by hordes of beasts and demons. Bosch's devils perhaps resemble these visions. Antony, placed in the geographical center of this triptych, has managed to resist every diabolical ruse through the strength of his faith. In the words of the Bible, "Even if a host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear."
Les tableaux de Bosch, ceux qu'on pense être des originaux de Bosch, ont une surface très rêche. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a ce qu'on appelle des empâtements. La matière picturale a un relief qui est volontairement laissé visible par l'artiste. Donc c'est une matière peut-être un peu grasse, pâteuse, qui donne ces petits monticules, ces petites crêtes. Mais c'est une grande innovation parce que la tradition des peintres des anciens Pays-Bas, les grands artistes de la fin du XVe siècle et puis parfois aussi du début du XVIe siècle, ils ont cette peinture très lisse, avec cet aspect un peu de porcelaine, qui est lié à une volonté de cacher le travail. En fait, le summum de l'art, c'est de se cacher comme art. On ne doit pas voir la trace de la main, la trace du pinceau. On doit avoir l'impression que les tableaux se sont faits eux-mêmes, que ce sont des images qui sont apparues d'elles-mêmes, en fait. Ce n'est plus ce que veut faire Bosch, qui, là, appartient à la modernité, en fait. Il y a la libération qui passe d'abord par la conscience et puis qui se fait, qui va jusqu'à la main, et de la libération, en fait, de l'expression individuelle. On n'a plus peur, en fait, on n'est plus terrorisé devant l'idée de montrer que l'on a fait soi-même tel ou tel tableau. Cette libération de la main dans l'expression graphique, assez nerveuse, assez spontanée, elle se présente d'abord au stade du dessin sous-jacent, comme elle le fait dans le tréfonds de la conscience humaine, finalement. Et elle va affleurer à la surface des tableaux, comme elle va affleurer dans le comportement des gens et dans une certaine libération spirituelle à laquelle on pourrait associer, par exemple, la naissance du protestantisme.
Bosch, at the time of the painter, was a religious and commercial centre built on marshy ground and crossed by an underground river, the Binnendiese, which served for transport. The construction of the Cathedral of St. John, a Gothic edifice in the Brabant style, began at the end of the 14th century, yet when Bosch died in 1516 it had still not been completed. The fantastic bestiary which adorns the cathedral's flying buttresses shows that inventiveness in the matter of monsters existed prior to Bosch. He may have found part of his inspiration in the art of the cathedral sculptors and in the illustrated margins of medieval manuscripts. During carnival time, the great cathedral comes to life.
Our society nowadays, of course, is not, as Renaissance and late medieval society was, dominated by religion. For us, religion is something which is remote, and even those who are very devout and who are very religious still do not, in a sense, have their daily life pervaded by religious ideas and by religious, I would say, eschatological values as people had in those early days. Life here is miserable, and it was for 99.9% of the people living in the 15th and 16th century a miserable life. So they were longing for that better life. And these pictures, like sermons, like prayer books, like so many other cultural feats of the time, were giving them keys, were giving them, as it were, ways towards salvation. As the 16th century goes on, aesthetic aspects become more important. But above all, these paintings are about salvation, are about Christian values and Christian ideals.
This striking clothed wooden sculpture of the Virgin Mary dates from the beginning of the 14th century and is still revered in the Cathedral of 's-Hertogenbosch. From 1479 onwards, to the north of the chancel, began the reconstruction of a chapel reserved for the Order of Our Lady. The archives tell us that Hieronymus Bosch himself became a member of this brotherhood in 1488. The financial success of the brotherhood was due in large measure to the sale of indulgences, the letters of which are kept here at the National Archives in 's-Hertogenbosch. In the minds of the faithful, indulgences had become a kind of investment in life after death. In return for payment, part of which went to the church, they were supposed to shorten the time the souls of the dead would have to stay in purgatory. Hans Dietz, known as Tetzel, a German preacher and exact contemporary of Bosch, even went so far as to say that souls leapt out of the fire as soon as the coins jingled in his till.
Ik zei al, een van de aflaatbrieven. Dit is een aflaatbrief die nog wat ouder is. Een aflaatbrief die zeer speciaal voor de broederschap van de Heilige Maria gemaakt is. De initiaal, de letter U, is hier zeer rijk versierd met een staande Maria. De broederschap kreeg hiermee het recht om iedereen die in de kapel kwam 40 dagen strafvermindering in het vagevuur te schenken. Tevens zit in deze brief ook besloten dat iemand die lid werd van de broederschap of schenkingen aan de broederschap deed, ook nog extra aflaten kon verdienen. En dat betekende natuurlijk dat hiermee eigenlijk de basis wordt gelegd van een broederschap die zich heel gemakkelijk over een flink stuk van de stad en zelfs van een flink stuk daarbuiten kon uitbreiden.
Christ, flagellated and crowned with thorns, is presented to the hostile crowd. The dialogue between the crowd and the Roman governor Pontius Pilate is indicated by Latin inscriptions. Pilate, who's holding a rod, the symbol of his authority, is pronouncing the words Ecce homo, behold the man. The people gathered at the foot of the terrace answer Pilate the hypocrite with Crucifige eum, crucify him. The third inscription, Salve nos Christi Redemptor, Save us, Christ the Redeemer, once emerged from the mouths of the donors situated on the lower left of the panel. Like the figure of Christ, which an unscrupulous collector had clothed, the male donors had been painted over. Their presence was revealed by X-ray photography, and they were uncovered during a recent restoration. On the lower right, barely visible, is a kneeling woman and 5 young daughters of the same family. As a sign of humility, all the donors are represented on a smaller scale than Christ and his contemporaries. The Middle East, as imagined by Bosch, is suggested by their clothing and headdress, for example the turbans of the group surrounding Christ. In the background, above the crowd, appears a city square. A red flag hanging from one of the buildings bears the Turkish crescent fluttering from one of its towers. Bosch reminds us that Muslim armies controlled the holy sites of Christianity. The Brotherhood of Our Lady still exists in 's-Hertogenbosch, on the very same site as in the 15th century. Today it's a Gothic-style house, the Zwanenbroedershuis, the House of the Brothers of the Swan. The 40 members still gather in these rooms in which the emblem of the Brotherhood, the swan, is omnipresent. For Bosch, this powerful network played a decisive role. It commissioned paintings and altarpieces from him and organized the promotion of his works outside the city.
We weten zeker dat hij erg populair was, omdat zijn schilderijen in die dagen al goed verkochten en omdat hij aan de hoogste heren dat moment, zelfs internationaal, schilderijen afleverde. Het gekke is dat hij daarna, eigenlijk na zijn dood in 1516, vergeten wordt door de stad. In de 16e, 17e en 18e eeuw is er eigenlijk nauwelijks iets over hem te vinden dan een aantal handboeken over de schilderkunst, zoals Karel van Mander. En pas in de 19e eeuw pikt de stad zijn grote zoon dan weer op, maar eigenlijk heel voorzichtig. Met de grote optocht ter gelegenheid van het 700-jarig bestaan van de stad wordt er een wagen meegevoerd waarin de beroemde mensen van Den Bosch zitten. En dat is onder andere Jeroen Bosch. En pas echt komt het terug in de jaren 30 van de vorige eeuw, dus van de 20e eeuw. In 1930 is pas het standbeeld van Jeroen Bosch opgericht op de markt.
In Bosch's time, as today during the carnival, meals and banquets fulfilled an important social role. During such gatherings, the business of the Brotherhood was dealt with, but they were also an occasion to strengthen social bonds. The 40 members of the Brotherhood were invited to dine several times a year, and the detailed description of their banquets is recorded in the archives. Accounts for the year 1488 to 1489, folio 198. The Brotherhood of Our Lady held a traditional meal of swans, and it was Hieronymus van Aken, painter, who invited the other brothers. In addition to the swan offered by our good Lord the Duke of Brabant, a second swan was bought for the sum of 8 stovers, and the servant who took care of it received a gratuity of 2.5 stovers. Total amount, 10.5 stovers.
Je pense que Bosch appartient à la fois au Moyen-Âge et à l'époque moderne. Pourquoi à l'époque moderne? Parce qu'il a innové dans le sens où il a créé la peinture de genre. Là, c'est le génie du Nord, ça, c'est cette façon de vouloir regarder le monde tel qu'il est, et non pas de vouloir transposer le monde dans un univers mythologique, dans un monde autre. Il y a premièrement cet intérêt pour la vie populaire, pas uniquement pour la vie populaire, mais pour des situations de la vie quotidienne. Il y a dans chaque situation humaine de la vie quotidienne un trésor de réflexion, un trésor d'enseignement à tirer.
Bosch introduced a new theme in painting. The moralizing, religiously inspired discourse becomes more secular. A photographer working for the Municipal Museum of Saint-Germain-en-Laye is making slide reproductions of The Conjurer, a genre painting, with a high-quality camera. The panel has just been restored before its departure for the Rotterdam exhibition. This copy of an original by Bosch is considered to be the best version of the composition, which is known to exist in two other versions in the museums of Jerusalem and Philadelphia.
Donc la scène de l'escamoteur, c'est une scène de prestidigitation dans laquelle un prestidigitateur donc fait sortir des grenouilles ou des crapauds de la bouche d'un ou d'une d'ailleurs personne naïve à laquelle on est d'ailleurs en train de voler la bourse, ce qui montre qu'il y a une tromperie en chaîne en fait. Non seulement la personne se fait berner parce qu'elle s'imagine que l'escamoteur lui fait sortir des crapauds de la bouche, mais en plus, toute fascinée par l'escamoteur, elle se fait voler par un personnage qui est situé derrière elle et dont on a dit trop vite que c'était le complice de l'escamoteur, ce que rien, absolument rien ne prouve. Dans cette idée qu'il y a là des complices, il y a une façon de participer à cette dénonciation de l'escamoteur comme une espèce de paria social qui est l'ennemi finalement. «
1531. Extract from the law of the Emperor Charles V. Proclamation against the rabble who are extremely harmful to the common good. To be forbidden from sojourning. Peddlers who sell matches, rat poison, pomades, unguents and balms, and all other such merchandise. They do nothing but travel about as swindlers, conjurers, charlatans and wrongdoers. 15 years after the death of Bosch, these lower-class travelling salesmen, the Varendeloiden, or people who wander, were considered the enemies of society.
Ce bateau, c'est une sorte de résumé du monde, en fait. Et l'image là, qui par la suite deviendra un thème très cher aux peintres du Nord, c'est celle du monde à l'envers. En fait, les fous sont les vrais sages, puisque là, le fou, avec sa marotte, il est bien tranquillement installé, un peu à l'écart des autres et en hauteur d'ailleurs, en train de manger quelque chose manifestement. Par contre, les soi-disant sages sont les fous. Et les fous qui sont là à chanter, à boire inconsidérément dans le navire. Et puis, il y a les pauvres aussi. Autre image sociale, ce sont les pauvres nus qui sont à nager et à demander leur pitance en tendant le bras. Donc, il y a, en accord avec le livre d'Erasme d'ailleurs, qui a été publié dans les toutes premières années du XVIe siècle, l'éloge de la folie, cette idée qu'il ne faut pas trop s'asseoir sur les certitudes des gens qui sont insérés dans la société.
Yet the carnival too is the world turned upside down. In Bosch's day the poor became lords, the wealthy dressed like tramps, and everyone poked fun at everyone else. Today, Prince Amadero and his adjutant leave their chambers in the central hotel of Sertogenbosch for the procession of the floats. It is without doubt the most popular day of the carnival.
Carnaval is een tijdelijke heerschappij, een tijdelijke parodie op de normale maatschappij. Dus je hebt daar ook een hoofd. En dat hoofd is Prins Carnaval, Prins Amadero Ricosto di Carnavallo hier in het bos sinds 1883. Die de scepter zwaait. En het feit dat hij op bezoek komt in het pronk wil zeggen dat het 3 dagen feest is in dat dorp Oeteldonk. En dat is één grote parodie, één grote persiflage op het stadsbestuur, op zeg maar de bosse maatschappij, of zeg maar zelfs de landelijke maatschappij.
Antwerp, 1563. In the midst of a religious procession, the people remarked the presence of a hay cart. According to a description of the time, it was ridden by a man disguised as a devil called Deceitful. The wagon in question was followed by ordinary citizens trying to grab a handful of hay. They were there to show that the material goods of this world are but alloy, all hay. Was Bosch perhaps influenced by religious processions and the carnival floats? The triptych of the hay cart illustrates the journey of life. At its centre we see a crowd flocking in the wake of a huge cartload of hay at which all and sundry are grasping. It's the wealth they're striving to gain from the world. It's the image of greed. But covetousness leads men and women to discord, violence, and even murder. People are prepared to kill or even to be run over by the wheels of the cart just to obtain a handful of hay, that is, a handful of nothing. The clergy are prey to the same evil. The nuns hurriedly stuff armfuls of hay into their bags while a pot-bellied monk sipping his glass of wine oversees the good work. The hungering after wealth spares no one. The powerful of this world, emperor, king and pope, also follow the hay cart. If they appear calm and detached from the violence down below, it's because they already possess the hay. But they are nonetheless its slaves. No one seems to notice that the hay cart, symbol of the world, is drawn by 7 devils, half man, half beast, towards the right-hand panel, towards hell. Schiphol Airport, Amsterdam. The 4 Paradise and Hell panels from the Doge's Palace in Venice, accompanied by the restorer Gloria Tranquilli, have arrived in Holland. The containers must be unloaded, the blue flight cases retrieved, and taken by truck to Rotterdam.
Panel paintings are extremely vulnerable to moist exposure and differences of temperature. And it may be possible to prepare a work of art as well as you can for a travel to another museum. Still something may happen, and it often does, as a matter of fact. Sometimes, for instance, there is a crack in the wood, or there is paint loss, or something like that. When you transport a work of art and you put it in an airplane, as long as it is in the airplane, it's fine. But then it gets unloaded, put from one truck to the other. That's the moment when something can go wrong.
These panels were examined for a condition report before they left Venice. As soon as they're unpacked here at the Boijmans Museum, they have to be checked over again. The comparison of results before departure and after arrival will enable the curators to see if the paintings have suffered during transit.
Là, ce sont des tableaux de petite dimension où il y a vraiment un sens plastique très moderne. Les parties du corps en lumière de ces monstres, les moustaches, les dents, etc., sont données par des petits empattements très nerveux de cette technique de Bosch avec cette surface rêche, donc une peinture d'une modernité extraordinaire. Et puis aussi ces très forts contrastes d'éclairage, donc ces coups de projecteur dans les panneaux représentant l'enfer. Mais il y a aussi, donc vision de l'au-delà, il y a presque, on pourrait presque entendre vision futuriste parce que il y a dans ce panneau qui montre la montée des âmes au paradis, cette idée extraordinaire des cercles concentriques à l'intérieur desquels s'engagent, guidés par les anges, donc les âmes qui sont matérialisées, symbolisées par des petits personnages.
Because the highly fragile large triptychs cannot be transported to the Netherlands, they will have to be filmed in situ at the Prado Museum in Madrid.
40, 30, 20, 10.
50 years after Bosch's death, King Philip II of Spain, who had always admired his work, bought or confiscated all the remaining paintings he could get hold of. Even today, the Spanish consider their favorite painters in the Prado Museum to be Velázquez, Goya and El Bosco.
En todos los museos hay cuadros que no viajan porque forman parte de la colección permanente, porque se encuentran en un estado de riesgo, no porque mientras están sin mover tengan peligro, pero si se mueven pues pueden sufrir, sobre todo por su tamaño y por que son tablas. Las tablas son delicadísimas, en este caso porque forman parte de la colección permanente, y lo mismo que no salen las meninas o no salen otras piezas importantes que no se prestan, no se pueden prestar.
This large triptych, The Garden of Earthly Delights, has given rise to a host of interpretations. In the 1950s, the German art critic Wilhelm Frenger upheld that Bosch had been a member of the Brothers of the Free Spirit. This sect practiced sexual promiscuity as part of their religious rites and sought the state of innocence that Adam had known before the fall. But in the late Middle Ages, pleasures of the flesh were considered as proof of man's weakness, at best a necessary evil, at worst a sin. And when Bosch made reference to the sin of lust, he always did so in a chaste manner. The couple hiding inside this mussel shell are a symbol of physical love. The women gathering fruit have succumbed to the temptations of the flesh, and the strawberry symbolizes the ephemeral side of sensual pleasure. The Spanish monk José de Sigüenza spoke in the 17th century of the vanity and fleeting glory of the strawberry, whose taste, barely savoured, has already vanished.
C'est une façon totalement nouvelle, totalement inventive, totalement innovatrice d'illustrer une idée qui, par contre, n'est pas spécialement originale. L'idée que le monde, depuis la chute, est voué au péché et que le châtiment du péché, c'est l'enfer. Il y a une inventivité, une richesse de l'imagination inégalée. Inégalée. Les associations dans le paysage, des animaux fantastiques, des oiseaux immenses, le chardonneret qui est plus gros que les hommes, de ces architectures qui mélangent le monde minéral, le monde végétal, etc. On n'a jamais vu ça. Donc il a laissé libre cours à son imagination. Et cette liberté, on la retrouve aujourd'hui parce qu'on a de même la liberté d'interpréter, de rêver, de voir un peu ce qu'on veut.
The Escorial, austere palace, monastery and pantheon of grey granite built by Philip II in 1557. Here the king could quietly devote himself to his favourite occupations, isolation, prayer, or the contemplation of his collection of paintings from the Spanish, Italian and early Netherlandish schools. In the privacy of his bedchamber, the gloomy Philip II reflected on the state of his soul before the tabletop of the 7 deadly sins. The painting was still in the king's bedroom the day he died. A large circle representing an eye features where the pupil should be an image of Christ emerging from the tomb. Underneath are inscribed the words, "Beware, beware, God sees." Gluttony. This overweight character, served by his wife and imitated by his son, has spent his whole life eating. Through gluttony, man loses all sense and understanding. Anger. Two men argue in front of a tavern and a woman tries to separate them. He wishes to speak in an offensive way, to strike and stab. He's consumed by the fire of impatience. Sloth. A man seated in a comfortable chair neglects his ecclesiastical duty. Faith appears to him in a dream as a nun calling him to prayer. Sloth distances man from God and encourages him to sleep. A biblical inscription deplores man's blindness and invites him to meditate on the four last things as understood by Bosch and his contemporaries. Death, followed by the resurrection and the last judgment, which will lead us, according to our acts, to heaven or to hell, where each sin is carefully labelled. The Spanish art collector Felipe de Guevara wrote, "These are pictures which have as their subjects the habits and passions of the soul of man. But wherever you are, think of the last four things, and you shall sin no more."
Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames, messieurs, bienvenue à Rotterdam. Welcome in Rotterdam. The first question, of course, is, are you ready with the exhibition? No, we are not ready. Nous ne sommes pas prêts, parce que nous sommes en train de travailler. Il faut encore beaucoup de travail aux lumières. We're still working on the lighting of the works. And yes, everything will be ready, and also all the promised pieces will be here, ready before the opening. L'ouverture samedi matin à 10 h en présence de Sa Majesté, la Reine Béatrix.
At the Boijmans Museum in Rotterdam, there's an atmosphere of excitement. After 5 years of scientific research and considerable diplomatic effort to acquire the Bosch paintings, Chris Durkin and the administrators wait for the Queen of Holland to officially open the exhibition. In a strange way, Queen Beatrix is related to Hieronymus Bosch.
Today is the opening, and it's the opening in the presence of Her Majesty the Queen. And what's absolutely fantastic is that probably Her Majesty is the closest of all of us to Bosch. And you know why? Because the illustre Onze Lieve Vrouwen Broedersgenootschap, it was one of the first mélanges of different beliefs with 40 brothers who were absolutely very, very rich and very important. All the Oranje Nassaus were members of the royal brothers of the illustre Onze Lieve Vrouwen Broedersgenootschap. And by descent, the Queen of Holland is a royal brother.
Despite the events of September the 11th, the show drew a huge crowd. Almost 300,000 people over a period of 2 months. It left its mark on the history of Hieronymus Bosch exhibitions. It highlighted the social context in which the painter created his works and demonstrated the creative influence of Bosch on contemporary art.
Er is een soort paradox in het werk van Bosch. Aan de ene kant is het heel onbegrijpelijk. En aan de andere kant is het iets wat door bijna alle mensen op de een of andere manier direct begrepen wordt. In zijn onbegrijpelijkheid. In ieder geval trekt het mensen aan. Gewone 15e-eeuwse, zeg christelijke West-Europese schilderkunst mag voor een Japanner of een Hindoe of iets misschien ver van hem afstaan. Maar om de een of andere reden schijnt men Bosch altijd te begrijpen. Hetzelfde is eigenlijk dat jeugd, mensen die nooit in een museum komen, voelen zich wel aangetrokken door het werk van Jeroen Bosch.
1516. Hieronymus van Aken, distinguished painter, is dead. The archives record what followed with typical Dutch precision. For the funeral on this 9th day of the month of August, to Willem Hammaker, Dean, the sum of 1.5 stovers for having sung Mass, and half a stover for his presence. For the deacon and subdeacon, 1 stover each. To all the others, priests, singers, bell ringers, organists and gravediggers, half a stover each.
Eigenlijk weten we over zijn dood zelf helemaal niks. Wat we wel weten is dat op een gegeven moment wordt gezegd dat hij dood is en dat er een uitvaart voor hem gehouden is. En daar zijn betalingen voor bekend. En nog wat later wordt zijn vrouw aangeschreven met de benaming weduwe. Maar over zijn dood zelf is weinig bekend. Het enige is, weten we dat in die tijd nogal veel doden zijn gevallen aan een besmettelijke ziekte in de stad.
Before lapsing into oblivion, Hieronymus Bosch had a decisive influence on certain painters of the following generation. No better example can be found than this panel by Peter Bruegel the Elder, painted in 1562, The Triumph of Death. "50 years after the death of Hieronymus Bosch, the Spanish Dominican priest Fray José de Sigüenza wrote, "His paintings are books of great wisdom and artistic value. If there are any absurdities here, they are ours, not his. And to say it at once, his themes are a painted satire on the sins and ravings of man." In Bosch's art, the dying Middle Ages flared to a new brilliance, before disappearing forever.